The Southwest Desert is a land of extremes which hosts a tremendous variety of native plant life. From this unique group of plants, a distinctive style has emerged among regional landscape designers. I'm Ed Hume, and this is Gardening in America. Today we're in Paradise Valley, Arizona, and I'm with landscape designer Judy Melke. Judy, what have you tried to accomplish in this landscape design?
This landscape design showcases some of the most distinctive of our southwestern native plants, the Palo Verde trees with their green bark, the real strong cactus shapes from the saguaro, the barrel cactus, and some of the less showy but equally important plants to include if you want the overall look to reflect the beauty of the natural Sonoran Desert.
And you've certainly accomplished it here. Is this a low maintenance landscape?
This is a moderate to low maintenance landscape. It takes very little water, and the amount of trimming that would be required depends on the overall look that the homeowner wants. My preference tends to be toward the wild look, which I think reflects the character of the desert the best.
You know what I'm amazed of at this landscape design that you've done here is the number of broadleaf plants that are native to this region.
Yes, although the desert is known for its plants with small leaves for water conservation, there are a fair amount of plants with larger leaves, but you'll notice that a lot of them are gray or silver in color, which does help to reflect the strong sunlight and is not as harsh on the plant as if they had a big, broad green leaf, like a maple leaf, for example. So the desert plants adapt in a variety of ways to the very harsh conditions.
Now, what was this area at the beginning?
This was an interesting project because when I arrived on the scene, it was completely flat and it was covered with grass.
Oh my gosh.
And the clients wanted a very natural Sonoran desert landscape. Their instructions to me to use only plants native right to the region. So we did some land sculpting to create some good undulation, brought in some massive boulders for texture, and our plant palette is drawn from the desert within 15 or 20 miles of here. It's a very local, regionalistic landscape.
Yeah, it's beautiful too. And I noticed out back it's a little bit different. You do have a pool back there, and you have a water feature, but then you have included the native plants again?
We've used a lot of mesquite trees in the backyard to create a mesquite bosque, which is a mesquite forest. And it creates a very shady atmosphere, which is, I think, appropriate for use with the swimming pool. And the water feature draws a huge variety of wildlife, particularly birds.
Judy, thanks for sharing this beautiful garden with us.
My pleasure.
There's a whole new group of roses, and this is one of them. The flower carpet rose, Noah Schnee, is the variety. It's a ground cover rose, and the specialists call it the environmental rose. What's so neat about this rose is that it only grows about 18 to 24 inches high, but will grow up to 3 feet wide, and it'll take temperatures down to about 5 degrees above zero. Now, the other interesting feature of this plant is that it can be used in hanging baskets or it can be used in containers, and it's considered the most resistant to disease of any of the white roses. Now, in spring pruning is what you do is cut this back usually around 6 to 12 inches from the ground, and then it renews itself and it flowers for a very long period of time. Now, planted in full sun or partial sun and shade. And if the temperatures, by the way, get below 5 degrees above zero, be sure that you give it some protection during the winter season. That's important. And maybe the first season too. Give it a little bit of bark or sawdust or soil over the bottom of the canes, maybe 6 inches or so high. And you do that, of course, in the autumn. And only for the first season unless the temperatures get really cool. Now, at planting time, the important thing is to be sure that you mix plenty of organic humus into the soil. You know, these types of roses really like the processed manure, the manure that you buy in the bags at your favorite garden outlet. And they like lots of peat moss in the soil too. And be sure that since this is in a container, that you plant it at the same planting depth as it was previously planted. The beautiful new flower carpet rose, Noah Schnee is the variety, and it's available at your favorite nursery or garden center. So ask for it by name, flower carpet rose, at your local garden outlet. There are lots of interesting vegetables that you can plant out into the garden, and the leaf crops are one crop that can go fairly early after all danger of frost is past. They're really a cool season crop. And there are several different types. Of course, all kinds of lettuce do exceptionally well. The head lettuce, I think, should be in a warmer climate, wherein as you'll use the leaf lettuce in cooler climates, and they'll grow very quickly and give you a mature crop very quickly. Now, also the chards can go in, and as well the spinach. They are a cool crop. They really do well in cool weather. Also keep in mind that if you're growing pak choi or similar oriental vegetables, they'll take warm weather, so don't plant them now. Also, the beets can go in because remember, we eat the greens of beets. So let's get busy here and I'll show you a few things about planting leaf crops into the garden. First of all, let's take an organic fertilizer and scatter it onto the soil like so. And then is what I'm going to do. You could take a rake if you want to, but is what I'm going to do is just mix this by hand, because I find it very easy to do that way, like so. Got it fairly level there. And then all we need to do is to read the back side of the seed packet, read all the directions. And I always find that the bottom side of the seed packet is the side that opens easiest. See how easy that opened? Now this lettuce seed, as you can see, is fairly small, quite dark too. So what I'm going to do is to scatter this out at the tips of my fingers like so. Boy, I don't really need quite that many seeds. However, there are two things you can do when you get them close like that. One thing is a leaf crop. You can pick the plants early and oh, they'll be so sweet and so tender and so nice. The other thing I can do as those come up, because they are so close, I can take those transplants and plant them somewhere else if I want to. Now, the next thing is a very easy, simple process of covering the seed. And I'm doing it with peat moss here, but you can do it with soil. The only reason I'm doing it with peat moss is so that you can actually see it. I like to do it, in fact, in a cool climate with vermiculite, where the soil tends to be a little bit too wet. But the key is barely cover the seed. We tend to cover it way, way too deep. But by covering it very thin like that, then the seed will germinate. The next thing is we do not pat the soil down. That presses the oxygen out of the soil. Now's a good time to plant those leaf crops, and you can see how easy it is. Do you have a rose that needs to be transplanted? Maybe it's in a spot too shaded, like this one. This only receives about 3 hours of sunlight a day, and it needs to be out where it gets about 8 hours of sunlight. So what we do is during the winter dormant season to actually dig the rose and transplant it. And I'm out about a foot from the bush, and I'm going to make a circle all the way around the plant like so. Cut right in, cut any of those roots. And then we'll take it up and it's ready to be transplanted. So as you can see, it's a very simple, a very simple process. I apparently have not cut a root on that side, and you'll run in probably to the same thing. There we go. So now that bush is ready to be transplanted into its new planting hole. So come on with me and I'll show you how to properly plant it. Now I've already prepared the planting hole and I've added some organic humus. That's really important with roses. The organic humus is in the form of processed manure and peat moss. I'm also going to add a non-burning rose fertilizer, an organic fertilizer, to the planting soil. And I'll mix that up a little. We don't want to burn the roots of the plant, so it's very important to use a non-burning material. Now, also, I'm going to take this rose, and sometimes, by the way, when you move these, the dirt will fall away and the plant will be bare root. Don't worry about that. That doesn't, during the deciduous season, that doesn't make any difference. I've got a little bit too much soil there, so we'll just pull a little bit of it out, like so. And I'm going to leave the open end towards the sun. And you can see how such a bright, sunny area this is. This is a perfect area for roses. So now I'll just pull that soil in. And since the bulbs were already there, I'm just leaving them right around the plant. There's no need to take them away. You could if you wanted to, but you sure don't have to. And we'll just firm the soil a bit around. Don't want to push the oxygen out, but at the same time, we want it to be in its place. Now, that's not the last part of it. The next part of it is to go ahead and prune the rose. Because we've already pruned the root system, let's do the top pruning too. And we always prune to an outside bud. There's one right there. So I'll make my pruning cut just above that outside bud. And on this cane, you can't see it, it's on the back side. But I'll prune again above an outside bud. And over here, above an outside bud. So I'm getting this rose down to the proper height so that we'll have foliage all the way from the ground up. You can see it's that easy, and during the deciduous time is the time to move your roses. One of the great additions to any garden are roses. They're really beautiful. But the climbing roses particularly can be a challenge. So here's a few ideas on how to prune them. First, let me show you what I consider a bad example. See, this plant has been allowed to grow naturally, and consequently, all the flowers are up here at the top. And what are you looking at the bottom but bare, ugly canes? So by proper pruning, we can correct that. But before we do, don't ever prune roses back like those bush roses over there, because they are properly pruned for a bush rose, but a climbing rose has a different situation. And that is that the cane grows one year, and then it flowers the next year. So if you prune it back severely like the others, you're not going to have any flowers on them. Now, another thing to keep in mind is allow some of these new canes to grow, but get rid of the old ones then, so that you keep renewing the plant. That's really important. And don't worry about, see here how long this new growth is, and sometimes they'll be 2 or 3 times longer than that. Don't worry about that. Still prune the roses at the proper time of the year, in late winter or earliest spring. We don't worry about the new growth at all. But if you keep those things in mind, and we're going to show you how to spread the canes and how to properly grow this rose. So come on with me. Now you can see here the canes have been pulled down, and what's going to happen now is secondary growth grows off of these canes, and that's what flowers. So you have flowers then almost all the way from the ground up, and you're not looking then at those ugly canes. Now this is a little bit kind of disassembled here, and it would be better if you're doing it against a fence or of course on a trellis or against a wall of some kind, that there be maybe a little bit more uniformity. But the important thing is to pull the canes down and get that secondary growth, because that's what actually flowers on a climbing rose. Now I mentioned earlier the importance of saving new canes and getting rid of some of the old canes. This is an old cane here, and you can see by the color of the cane. I didn't point that out before, and that's really important. Those old ones are very obviously old, and get rid of them and encourage new ones to come, and that will revitalize the plant. Now the only pruning that's done, then the following year, you do these, let them grow to the length that you want them, and then tip them on the ends. That's the only pruning you do, except for this upright growth. As you can see, it's cut back quite short. So by cutting this back, that encourages a secondary growth, and your climbing roses are going to be absolutely beautiful.
It's still winter here in the Northwest, but it's warm enough today to make me realize that spring is just around the corner. And I've got the perfect hardscape improvement to make spring in our garden that much more enjoyable. As you can see, we've used this area of the garden as a somewhat informal seating area, but as you can see, it's not particularly inviting. So today I'm going to demonstrate just how easy it is to improve this area, tying it in with the rest of the garden and replicating the patio design onto the seating area. So let's move these chairs and begin. Now the first step is to construct an edge restraint for the pavers. I've used treated 2x4s because it helps me level the area before the pavers go in place. With a shovel, mark it off around the frame. Remove the frame and excavate an area deep enough and wide enough to accommodate the frame. Next, level the frame. Now it doesn't have to be exactly level. You want it to be graded so that the water will actually run off the pavers when it's complete. Then add about 1 inch of granular compacted material, followed by 1 inch of wet compacted sand. Now I've created a scree board using just a straight board notched out on the end to allow a 2-inch depth for the pavers to fit. And smooth the area and then begin laying the pavers. Now I've chosen a random pattern here, and I've also worked out my design ahead of time to simplify the process and to determine the exact number of stones I'm going to need. Now isn't this a wonderful improvement? I've swept bark dust in between the pavers, but later on when it gets warmer, I'll remove the bark dust, fill the area with soil, and add the Scotch moss. Now you may choose to use a Corsican mint or a woolly thyme or any number of ground covers just simply to soften the effect of the pavers. I've also purchased shrubs to go around the area to enhance it further. And the wonderful thing about this project is it took me less than an hour to complete. And I can just imagine sitting in this area when the garden is in full bloom and enjoying it to its fullest.
We're in Phoenix, Arizona at the Desert Botanical Garden, and I'm with the Director of Community Relations, Chuck Smith. Chuck, what part of the gardens are we in here?
This is the succulent area, and most of the plants in this area, those that are in bloom right now, are all from South Africa.
Now you have several different areas of the garden, don't you?
Yes. We have a South American bed where we have a collection of South American cacti that are hard to see at a lot of places because they're not real common. We've got a Mexican section where we have agaves, which they make tequila out of in Mexico. And we've got an African section, and we have an Australian section, not yet open, but we're working on it. It's already planted. And then we've got a very interesting Plants and People of the Sonoran Desert Trail. And that trail is to give us an idea of how the Native Americans used plants for their everyday needs for food, clothing, and shelter.
Oh, wow. You know, further down the garden, too, I noticed that you have a demonstration garden.
Yes, we have what's called the Center for Desert Living, and that's to show us how we live in the desert today. So there's a demonstration garden there that shows different types of gardens that you can have in your yard for vegetables or herbs or what have you. And then we also have a Desert House project, which is a water and energy conservation house to show people how to use plants to help conserve energy and water consumption.
Now, here in the gardens as well, you also conduct classes, don't you?
We have a full educational program. With so many people moving into the Phoenix area, it's important that they learn how to plant and how to garden in our desert environment.
I'm sure.
So we offer a full slate of classes. We have arts and crafts classes, basket weaving, and lots of different things. We show people how you can use plants to make food, jams and jellies and all that sort of thing.
Now, how many acres does the garden cover?
The garden has 145 acres, and the core part of the garden is 35 acres, and it's surrounded by those 145 of natural Sonoran desert.
And you know, I had a chance to go through your gift shop. You've got a beautiful gift shop here.
The gift shop features anything and everything that has to do with plants.
Yeah.
And then we also have a plant shop. The plant shop is open pretty much all year. We close down at the end of May and then we reopen in October because of the hot season. But the gift shop is open every day from 9 to 5, and the garden hours, by the way, we have 2 seasons. And in the warmer season, which is May 1st through September 30th, we're open from 7 o'clock in the morning until 10 o'clock at night.
Oh, wow.
And then when it cools off a little bit, we're open from 8 to 8 every day, except December 25th.
Is there a fee for the gardens?
Yes, there is a nominal fee to come into the garden. We are a private, nonprofit organization, and so we do have to charge an admission fee to cover our expenses.
Thanks, Chuck. That's all the time we have today. Hope you can join me at this same time again next time for Gardening in America.